All right, this evening we will be talking with David Pepose about his Kickstarter, The Oz. He is also you might recognize the name from his Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel, which he did for Action Lab Comics. So, without much further delay, let's go ahead and bring him in and find out about his current project.
Hi,
Hi,
Chad.
how's
Thank
it
you so much
going?
for having me. It's going
Well,
great.
thanks for taking the time.
Of course, of course. No, I'm so excited to chat with you about the OZ. It's a book that's been kind of in the works for a very long time, and yeah, I couldn't be happier to finally get to show this book off to the world and the Kickstarter community.
Well, I know that it was probably a month or back. I think it was back in February, or January. I meant to uh, you know contact you and do an interview about going to the chapel, and then you know everything
The
went
world,
pandemic.
sure, sure. No, you know what? I'm glad we're making up for lost time. Uh, yeah, it's pretty wild going from a book that's Die Hard at a Wedding to doing a book that's Mad Max meets it's the Wizard of Oz. But that's the fun and magic of comics. Is that nobody pigeonholes you. You get to kind of do whatever's in your imagination, and that's what I love about this industry. But yeah, it's definitely if you're a fan of my work at Spencer and Locke, you're definitely gonna love what we've got in store for you for the OZ.
So before we get into that, tell me about do you remember the comic that you hooked, and which one made you want to write your own?
Well, so the one that got me hooked is a little easier to remember. It was Amazing Spider-Man. I believe it was 346. It was right before, is the issue before Spider-Man fights Venom on the island.
Mhm.
So it's this beautiful Eric Larson art of Spider-Man fighting Venom throughout the city. As a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, that blows your mind. And so I remember carrying that book with me everywhere. I remember my parents got me a few others. They got me an issue of Captain America. It was Cap and Jack Frost fighting the Ice Worm. An issue of Silver Surfer that did not have the Silver Surfer in it. It was Drax the Destroyer versus Adam Warlock. And some issue of the Incredible Hulk where Hulk pours like radioactive waste on the Abomination's face. I remember that one creeping me out a little. And then I read the second issue of Infinity War, and I remember those double gatefold covers. You saw all the characters in the same spot, and it blew my mind as a kid. I realized, oh, all these characters are in the same place. And then you get to see people like Hawkeye and Wolverine and Mr. Fantastic. And I was just like, this is amazing. So I was hooked pretty much from then on in. I want to say, the book that made me decide to want to be a comics writer. Boy, that's a tough call because I, unlike a lot of people who go into this industry thinking, oh yeah, I want to be a writer. It took me a very long time to consider that even an option. I got my
Mhm.
start as a DC Comics intern. I worked in editorial. I worked on Final Crisis and Batman R.I.P. I thought that was my track. And I worked as a reviewer at Newsarama for over a decade. And as I kind of got to learn the lay of the land with the industry, and I took classes on comics editing, I realized, oh, that's all the parts of my job that are the hardest right now, with none of the upside. If I'm going to steer the ship, I want to steer my own ship. And
Mhm.
so at the time, I thought maybe I'd go into television development. I had been a newspaper reporter. I then went on to work publicity at CBS in New York, and I thought I'd move to Los Angeles and work in development. And so I kind of slowly dipped my toe in the writing pool. I wrote the first issue of Spencer and Locke, and I really liked it. And so then I wrote an outline, and I really liked that too. And then I was like, maybe I'll find an artist. That'll be fun. Maybe I'll pitch it, see what happens. Suddenly, I get an email saying, "How soon can you get this done?"
Mhm.
And it's like a whole new ball game. So I think around that time, I really liked Afterlife with Archie. Criminal from Ed Brubaker, I was a big fan of. Southern Bastards from Jason Aaron and Jason Latour. And things like Warren Ellis's Moon Knight, Brendan Fletcher and Babs Tarr's Batgirl. Those
Mhm.
all really appealed to me. I think in that period of time. Um, I think I was also feeling this sense of I wasn't really vibing with a lot of what I was reading at the time. And I think subconsciously I knew I needed to make a change with my relationship to comics. It was either I need to, if there's no comics that I'm really enjoying, I need to make the comics that I would enjoy, or I need to get out. And thankfully I picked the first choice. You know, I didn't know I was going to stay in comics writing, you know, because I didn't know how that book was going to be received. I when you have a book that's What If Calvin and Hobbes Grew Up in Sin City, you either succeed or you fail, but you don't do it quietly. And so I was, every night before a new issue would come out, I would be in a cold sweat thinking, is this the week they turn on us? And thankfully that didn't happen. People really kind of universally enjoyed the book. So, yeah, you know, that was sort of when the dust settled and I popped my head out and I realized it was safe. That's when I kind of said, maybe I can make a run at this. And so I've been really, that's what I've been working on ever since.
And those were through Action Lab, right?
Yes. Yeah. So both volumes of Spencer and Locke, I'm working on the third right now, and Going to the Chapel, they all came out through Action Lab.
Okay. I know a lot of people. Well, I was there when the people were forming the were forming Action Lab. So,
oh wow.
It was our Dave Dewan, Sean Pryor. I don't know if you.
Yeah, so. I know. Dave's the one that pulled us out of the slush pile. So yes, yeah. I know Dave very well.
Great guy.
Yeah, I love him. Great guy.
So let's talk about the OZ now. What is the premise, and you know, what is who are the characters? What's the conflict? You know.
Yeah.
Why, you know.
Yeah. So the OZ, like you know, it's what if Mad Max and the Hurt Locker took place in the Wizard of Oz? It's we've recontextualized Dorothy Gale killing the Wicked Witch of the West as something like a botched regime change. And so when Dorothy clicks her heels and returns home to Kansas, she's inadvertently left Oz this power vacuum that sends the country spiraling into years of brutal civil war. So our story picks up a generation later with Dorothy's granddaughter and namesake, who happens to be a disillusioned Iraq war veteran. And she's come back from her time overseas with some real trauma and guilt and scars. But unfortunately, while she's kind of grappling with this in small town Kansas, a tornado hits, and this new Dorothy finds herself in the war-torn land of Oz. So she's going to have to really confront her own past and her grandmother's legacy, not to mention navigate her grandmother's former friends, if she hopes to survive the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ. So, yeah, you know, it's sort of, we're able to take those kind of universal archetypes from the original L. Frank Baum novels and from the Judy Garland film that everyone knows and loves, but is not in public domain, so I can't explicitly reference it in the book. You know, we're able to take those kind of universal characters, and we're able to, you know, take different spins on them, but still remain true to the character. So, you know, Dorothy, for example, you know, by virtue of who her grandmother was, she's got this kind of burden of responsibility thrust upon her. Everyone's looking to her be a leader, to have answers. And at the same time, Dorothy, she's been in a war before, and she's had a lot of second thoughts and disillusionment about it. She's thought, what is it all for? And so in certain ways, the OZ is a second chance for her. It in certain ways, it does make her confront all these horrific memories that she's endured, which we'll explore through the book. But deep down, she sees it as a second chance to make things right. Whereas we've got the Tin Soldier, who, you know, this is a guy who's been destroyed and rebuilt so many times with whatever metal is around him that he's turned into this towering war machine freedom fighter. At the same time, though, he's the guy who wanted a heart. And so what happens to that heart when you've spent years watching your friends die in front of you as the sole survivor? Do you bury that heart, or is that something that's always going to come back? We've got the Scarecrow, who is kind of the most complicated figure, I think, in the whole series. I had a lot of fun really exploring that character. He's the guy who wanted a brain, but he's come to learn over the years that being the smartest guy in the room doesn't necessarily mean you have the answers to every problem. That sometimes being the smartest guy means you're just the first one to see how awful everything is. And at the same time, you see guys like Elon Musk, self-described geniuses, there's always that ego. And so what happens to the guy who keeps going to the Rubik's Cube over and over and over again and still can't solve it? What does that do to you as a person? The Lion is one of my favorite characters. His story really coincides a lot with Dorothy's. It's a story about legacy. You have these ideals from the past that we often look at with nostalgia and rose-colored glasses, and then you get dragged through the muck of the war. Are those ideals realistic? Can we ever attain those, or is it just the compromises we've made along the way have made it just totally infeasible? This is a guy who wanted bravery, and how does that calculus change when you've gone from just fighting for yourself to being the king of the animal kingdom? I think that's the thing I like most about the OZ. It's not just sort of the mashups of the fantasy and the military, although those are cool moments as well. But we get to see not just how the war has affected Dorothy as a person, but also those around her. That core group that we last saw the other side of the rainbow, they've been touched by this war in very profound ways. And it's really been fun to kind of explore each of their different personalities.
So, tell us a little bit about the rest of your creative team on the book. How did you meet them? What was it about their style that made you say this is perfect for this?
Sure.
This new and exciting take on Nas.
So what happened was, I'd been working on this book for a little while. Like I said, this has been in the works since for about 3 years now. So I had written the outline and the first issue, and I had spoken with a publisher who had asked me to develop it, and we made it to the 1 yard line, and it just so happened that a bigger creator had come up with a dark fantasy book that got pitched right alongside us. And so the publisher had to make a choice, and I don't begrudge them one iota. If you're choosing between somebody with a long track record and just the guy who wrote Spencer and Locke, it's a no-brainer. But the editor I worked with they didn't have to do this, but they said, listen, I want you to know this is not a referendum on you or this concept. The chips just didn't fall your way this time, but I really recommend you pursue this book. And that little bit of kindness really kind of made all the difference. I felt encouraged, and I knew, okay, this book means something. I'm going to make it happen. So, I want to say it was late 2017, early 2018, maybe. I reached out to Ruben Rojas. I found him on Twitter answering a call for artists, and his style is just like if Dan Mora and Sean Murphy had a baby. It's like it's that cartoony style that's still got some weight to it. He's able to turn on a dime from this like fast-paced action to this really moody, dramatic character work. And he's such a gifted designer. He's probably one of the most gifted designers I've ever worked with. He adds so much to the settings and the characters. This is his wheelhouse. And so I found Ruben's work, was immediately blown away, and I pitched him 3 books. I said, I've got a book called Grand Theft Astro that had then been unacquired. It's now over at Top Cow. The OZ, and a third book that I'm sort of redeveloping right now. And Ruben just immediately latched onto this one, and I'm so glad he did, because he's the real deal. He's a superstar in the making. We're already talking about what our next project's going to be, whether it's a sequel to the OZ or something else entirely. But I'm working with him till the wheels come off. He's that terrific. Whitney Kogar and DC Hopkins are sort of our other secret weapons. Both of whom were recommended to me by my pal Michael Mocchio, who I was his editor at Newsarama once upon a time. And since then, he's gone on to be an assistant editor at Boom Studios. Now he's at Scholastic. He's doing work over at Mad Cave. But I've always taken a degree of ownership for Michael. Just like any editor, your freelancers are your babies, and that doesn't change whether they're writing for you or not. And so I've always felt very invested in Michael's career. And I live down the street from Boom Studios, so I would regularly take him out for dinner just to make sure he's getting fed. And he told me, I love working with Whitney Kogar. I love working with DC Hopkins. They are both so reliable and so talented and so good at what they do. And Mike really undersold it. They are fantastic. Dave Hopkins, or DC Hopkins as he's known. I met him at a con, Denver Comic-Con, I believe, a year or so back. Super laid back, wonderfully gracious, amazing team player, so considerate of his collaborators, which I think is so huge. He's the center of calm in what can be a somewhat chaotic production process. Whitney, meanwhile, just as a DC intern, they always used to impress upon me that art makes or breaks your comic. And then they said colors make or break your art. Having the wrong colorist can sink even the strongest line art, but having the right colorist can elevate anything. And to call Whitney Kogar the right colorist is just to dramatically undersell it. She is just, we talked a lot about what the Mad Max version of Star Wars might look like, and that's her color palette. She just she gets that intensity and she gets that level of grit, but she's able to also really channel that variety of visuals and that sense of scale and wonder that you would have in a fantasy world. I mean, the Land of Oz has teeth, but it's still a beautiful place in its own sort of war-torn fashion. And Whitney just, she nails it. As somebody with a lot of opinions about colors, I don't really have to hold Whitney's hand, which is amazing. She gets it almost exclusively. I basically rubber stamp her work. And we're working with the Murderers Row cover talent as well. Ruben's main cover is beautiful, but we've also got 3 variant covers from Mon House, who I've worked with on Spencer and Locke and Go Into the Chapel. He's got a winged monkey cover that's amazing. Rio Burton, who's got kind of our movie poster cover. And then Kenneth Wagnon, who I was so blown away by his variant. He's got an Akira-inspired homage cover that was so gorgeous that the first thing I said to him when I saw it hit my inbox was, "How much for the original?" It's just
one with the Humvee.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just trying to bring that one up because that one kind of caught my
popped out at you
too.
Yeah. It's just I think the secret of this team is we all egg each other on, and we all kind of inspire each other to deliver our A game. And yeah, it's just it's something unlike anything I've ever experienced in the comics industry. And I've worked with some incredible teams in the past who have all been more than the sum of their parts. And I think the OZ really just continues that lucky streak that I've had. Because when you work with creators like this, it's hard not to feel inspired.
Mm-hmm. So how was writing this? Was it any different from writing like Going to the Chapel or any of your other books? Because it seems like a totally different what's the word I'm looking for?
Different animal.
Direction style. Yeah.
It was certainly very different than Going to the Chapel. Because that book was kind of light in its feet, and it was more at like kind of an Ocean's 11 meets Arrested Development kind of swagger. And that was deliberate. I didn't want people to think I just wrote depressing, bleak stuff. I've said outside of straight horror, Spencer and Locke's gonna be the bleakest thing I ever write. I don't even think the OZ is as bleak as Spencer and Locke. It was very different. I always want to try to flex different muscles with different books. This felt like a true blue team book in a lot of ways. And Go Into, which had our 3 core characters and then a lot of stuff good measure. This is also the longest book written. Second 6-issue mini I've ever written, with Grand Theft Astro being the first. But most of my series beyond that had been 2/3 the size. And so that's kind of like, all right, you have to figure out like, how do you go the distance? It's very much like a marathon. And I think every artist you work with, there's a little bit of a different style, as you get to know each other, and you get to start tailoring things to their strengths. I think Ruben was really savvy that he picked an idea that really did play to every strength he's got. And I think beyond that, though, it was just kind of trying to tell something with a different tone. This is definitely an action adventure story that's got some weight to it, but I think we also have that character, that sense of character at the heart of it, that I think kind of justifies some of the heavier subject material that we dive into. But yeah, it's definitely, it's its own animal, and I think launching it for Kickstarter certainly is its own animal. And I'm very fortunate that the way that this series kind of came together, it's structured over 3 acts. And so I was able to take the 6 issues I had written and package them together. So we can do this over 3 Kickstarters rather than 6 and lead me to a nervous breakdown.
So is this year the first Kickstarter you've done?
My very first. It's my very first.
Your very first?
I couldn't be happier. My very first Kickstarter. Couldn't be happier with the response. Right now we're at 500% funded and counting. We hit 300% in our first 24 hours, which was wild. You believe in these books. You believe in your team, and that's the reason why you kind of roll the dice on a platform like Kickstarter. And yet you never expect to see this kind of reaction. That you don't expect to see the world immediately get it. And I think it just, it goes to show that Kickstarter versus the direct market, it's almost like a different planet with different laws of physics. For example, something I like to talk about is our Kickstarter launched the same day as Scott Snyder, who launched his book Nocturnal. And that book, if that had come out in the direct market, it would have been a kill shot for me. Comic shops have a limited amount of shelf space, a limited amount of bandwidth, a limited amount of money to put risks on books. And if they're going to choose between the writer of Batman and the writer of Spencer and Locke, it's a no-brainer. They got bills to pay. Kickstarter is very different. A rising tide really floats all boats on that platform. And so Scott brought in so many people who had never done a Kickstarter before, got them into that ecosystem, and Kickstarter's whole business model is to keep people there. So what they'll do is they'll say, oh, hey, you bought Nocturnal. There's this other book called The OZ. You should check it out. I've seen they do a really effective job at promoting everybody's work. I get all these updates from different Kickstarter campaigns. I see ads from, on Scott's campaign. It's getting close to $150,000, and we're a recommended title right underneath it. I consider that a $150,000 commercial. You can't buy that kind of publicity. I feel like we really entered. No, certainly not at a comic writer's salary. That's a joke. It's very much, I consider, we have the strongest possible wind at our backs. And I think that speaks to the power of Kickstarter as a platform. It's one that I'm so glad that I've done. Similar to when I first wrote a comic and I said, why didn't I do this sooner? I feel the same way about Kickstarter. The ability to interact with our readers on a one-on-one basis is huge. And I think, the fact that readers feel a sense of investment over this book, that they feel like this book exists because of, it's very the direct market. And I think creators, if they're being smart, I think are going to, start looking at the direct market and Kickstarter and digital comics or web comics and outside of the direct market and conventions and multimedia. They're going to have to navigate all of these different pools in order to future-proof themselves for an industry that has never been known for its stability.
Well, this is, Kickstarter seems to, you would think that given these, times that we live in currently, that, platforms like Kickstarter might hurt, but I mean, people are able to get new material there while the other companies were, kind of shut down.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, COVID definitely made me kind of rethink how I'm planning on doing business in the future. I was a con warrior before this. I had 16 shows on the agenda this year. I got to do 2. And it made me think, okay, what am I going to do to kind of, shift gears? So like I said, I've been thinking about Kickstarter for a long time because there are so many people that don't buy their books through the direct market, or don't buy them on Amazon, or don't buy them at cons. There's a whole demographic that's
Mm-hmm.
just Kickstarter. And I realized that was a whole demographic I had done no outreach to.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Kickstarter is everybody wants new content. Everybody's looking for new stories. Like I said, there's that more personal element of being a backer, of saying, I help bring this to life. And I feel like, with that in mind, and people are not going out to restaurants anymore. They're not going out to movies. They're just their entertainment budget has been slashed. And they're like, oh, I could get a double-sized comic with 2 more issues of comics for $10. It's 88 pages. That's not a bad deal. I can get 3 trade paperbacks and a single issue for $30. That's not bad. And to kind of, keep building our readership, to keep building our audience, because I think that's an existential crisis that the direct market is going to have to face, is how do we expand beyond sort of the diehards? How do we stop preaching to the choir and start getting converts? And that's always the approach that I've taken, from my concepts to the way I market, and now to the platforms that I'm choosing to distribute on. I want to invite more people to the table, and I want to build that wider, larger consensus. And I think Kickstarter is a really powerful tool in enabling that.
So let's talk a little bit more about the rewards levels that you have for the
Sure.
Kickstarter.
Sure.
Can you kind of just run through them and what people can receive for what prices?
Yeah. Well, every level starting from our $5 level on, I'm offering the first issue of Spencer and Locke and Going to the Chapel. We're offering PDFs of those. It's because I want to introduce more people to my work. And I feel like Kickstarter is a great way to do it. You see on the screen, we have 819 backers and counting. And I'd like to crack 1,000 by the time this campaign is done. And I think we can do that. So that means that another 1,000 people get introduced to all of my work, which feeds into more people buying it. Beyond that, our $10 tier, which you get the 40 PDF of the OZ. You also get my scripts, because I want. You also get Ruben Rojas's Raw and Whitney Kogar's Untouched Colors. $20. You get. At least I think I don't have the screen up in front of me, so I'm doing this hopefully correctly.
Let me just scroll.
But we've got our main cover. We've also got our 3 variant covers. We've got print versions of that. We're actually looking at enhancing our single issues. We're looking to do enhancements for our main cover, either raised UV or possibly even a metallic option. We're talking with our printer about that right now. We're also adding new pinups to the book. We've got people like Alex Cipriano, Joe Mulvey, a few other artists that we're really excited to get their work in as well. We've got we had Skype sessions with me for portfolio reviews, but as of today, I believe those are actually all taken. We also had commissions from Ruben Rojas, which are also taken at this point. We've got bundles with all of my trades. We've got sketch cards with Ruben's initial design for Dorothy. We've also got digital rewards. We hit our first stretch goal, so we're doing a digital comics extravaganza for all of our backers. So that means you're not just getting my books, but you're getting a dozen PDFs from indie creators all over the industry. People like Justin Jordan, Frank Gogol, Ryland Grant, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles co-creator Kevin Eastman. So that's very exciting. So even if you throw in $10, you're getting hundreds of pages of material to show for it. We've also got all of our physical backers have unlocked a comic-sized print from Kira Okamoto. That just got broken yesterday. We're working on a new stretch goal. We're going to be offering stickers if we hit 35,000. So that'll be cool. We're just wrapping up the design on it right now. We'll have that to show hopefully tomorrow. We've even got for our super special premiere tiers, we have a little piece of history. I had made 10 handmade Spencer and Locke plushies when our first book came out. We have 2 left. This is a piece of history. So if you're a Spencer and Locke super fan, you can back our King of the Jungle reward tier, and you can get yourself your very own. When I say limited edition, it's not doing it justice. The person we had making those dolls is no longer in the game, so this is it. So yeah, but we wanted to make sure that we had rewards for every level of budget, because times are tough. People are saving up. We wanted to make sure that our book had value. And I think by virtue of how can we enhance the book, how can we do add-ons that fit within our shipping infrastructure, and what can we distribute digitally, we've got a lot of really cool rewards in store.
Well, it definitely sounds like you do, and so you have something for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the campaign so appealing.
Yeah, everybody, that, like I said, we want to invite everybody to the table, and we don't want budget to be constrained. And so we are offering add-ons for the people who want to throw in more money, the people who want all 4 covers, the collectors, for example. But at the end of the day, if you just want the $10 digital, that's enough to get you on board. I'm a lurker on Kickstarter. I do primarily digital because I live in a 2-bedroom in LA. I don't have room for all this stuff. But it's sort of my way of giving to the community. It's my way of supporting unique voices, independent voices that might not, through no fault of their own, through no lack of talent on their own, but might not have been the right fit for a conservative, traditional publishers acquisitions pipeline. And yeah, so we want to make sure that everybody can join the OZ, because this is going to be a really fun, interesting, cool story that you guys aren't going to want to miss.
So you said you have another volume, Spencer and Locke, coming out. Is going to the chapel? Is that kind of over and done with?
Never say never. I mean, I always write with an idea in my back pocket. Chapel was a hard book to write. That was by far the hardest book I've ever written. Just because you kind of have to juggle where everybody is at any one time. I have an idea in my back pocket. It kind of depends on my bandwidth and Gavin's bandwidth and Liz Kramer's bandwidth. Like, I would never want to do a sequel to that without them. So it's really just kind of figuring out, is the demand there? Is the time? Do we have the time? But yeah, I'm working on Spencer and Locke 3 right now. It's been a long time coming. Unlike between volume 1 and volume 2, where I had no projects to do, I've written 6 books since volume 2. So I'm almost done with clearing off my plate. I have one more book to write, and then I can really dig in. But yeah, it's something that I really want to see through. We've got the whole team back in the saddle. So yes, it is coming. Bear with me. I promise it's only because I've got other cool stuff coming.
Well, whenever you have that other cool stuff coming, then hopefully you'll want to come back and we'll talk about the other cool stuff.
Yes.
So, do you want to give
more announcements coming soon?
Do you want to give a final
soon?
So, do you want to give a final pitch for the OZ? Yep. Where people can find you on social media, and I'll include all this in the notes. But
you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Pepose D. It's my last name and first initial, or David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can also subscribe to my newsletter Pep Talks at bit.ly/pepnews. And then you can follow the OZ on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the OZ Comic. You can also hit our Kickstarter at bit.ly/the OZ Comic, and it'll take you right to our Kickstarter page. And yeah, it's one of those things. It's Kickstarter, so every backer matters. Every dollar counts. We want to build as wide of a readership as we can. And this book, if you like Mad Max, if you like The Old Guard, if you like Fables or DMZ, or just my work on Spencer and Locke, you're going to love this book. I think it's some of my best writing. It's for sure
Mm-hmm.
one of the most beautiful books I've worked on. And
Well,
yeah, you may think, oh yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I would say any even fans of the Wizard of Oz, because it's a
Yeah,
totally new
it's a
take on the
total,
whole.
yeah. It's one of those things you may think the story of the Wizard of Oz, but this is what comes next. So we want you to join us as an honorary Yellow Brick Road warrior, and we hope to see you in the trenches of the OZ.
So, one last question? Are you
Yeah.
currently reading anything that you would recommend? It can be
Oh
anything.
boy, since the Kickstarter launched, I've been very behind on my reading.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading. What was I reading recently? I was reading Suicide Squad by Tom Taylor. I was reading Deceased, Dead Planet, also by Tom Taylor. He's been really kind of killing it lately. Donny Cates doing great work on Venom. Al Ewing doing great job on Guardians of the Galaxy. I haven't had a chance to read Three Jokers yet, but I'm a huge fan of Jason Fabok, so I'm excited to see him back in the saddle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming out. Bleed Them Dry over at Vault, really cool, really liking that a lot. But yeah, you can't go wrong. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out. White Ash over at Scout. They just wrapped their first arc. It's a terrific book that's also got its start on Kickstarter. So I wholeheartedly recommend that. And yeah, beyond that, once this Kickstarter's over, I'm gonna catch up on like a month's worth of reading, and then I'm gonna sleep for a week. I'm looking forward to it. It's like 10 cons back to back. But you run the marathon because it's worth it. And seeing the way that people have responded to this book, I couldn't be more grateful. And it makes me double down even harder because I'm not going to let you guys down.
Well, it definitely looks exciting, and can't wait to read the final product.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, you're welcome back anytime.
Absolutely. Definitely. I'll take you up on it for sure.
All right. Let me just throw up my end screen, and then we can sign off. There we
Great.
go. And that's where you can find my stuff. That's my Twitter, my Instagram, Facebook, my email if you want to, email me, and tell me how awkward the review was. But anyway, again, thanks everybody for joining us. Go support the book. Check out David's other books, and we'll hopefully be talking to you soon.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you.